Hey everybody, Norm from Tested here, and we have a very special guest in studio today. It's Darrell Maloney, the Broken Nerd. Darrell, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
We're doing awesome because you're here this week to work with us on some special projects. But back home, you've been working on a prop inspired by a movie prop.
Correct. And it is the sword that Achilles uses in the movie Troy.
So you're designing your take on that prop using some reference. And what we want to do is dive into your 3D modeling process.
Yep.
Because so much of your model making is in your head and in the computer screen.
Correct.
Where do you start?
So I start off with using reference photos, and if I need exact measurements, I'm pulling out a measuring tape, doing measurements, and translating that into the program. And then I start with some basic primitive shapes and kind of get my shape, and then export it out for printing.
It's so easy, right? It's just like that.
I wish
right?
it was that easy.
To give you guys a better sense of what that modeling entails for those of you out there who are interested in 3D modeling, here's Darrell explaining his modeling process with some screen capture for this inspired prop.
All right, so let's jump right in. So as you can see, I already have my reference picture placed into the program, and it's already been scaled to size. According to this picture, which I pulled off propstore.com, I believe this is one of the swords that was used in the movie. All right, so I'm going to start off with a cube, and let's scale this down a bit. And what I'll do is I'm going to split this cube in half once I get the general shape. So this way I'm only working on one side. And I'll put this in the symmetry tool. So this way I'm only working on one side and I'm not creating double work for myself. Make this an editable object. I'm gonna go ahead and insert a cut. So this way I already have it. And then I wanna zero this out to make sure that it is directly in the middle of our cube. And being that this picture is not fully centered, I'm going to mostly use the bottom portion of the sword as my reference to get a good shape. It seems like this sword was taken at a slight angle. I tried to position it as best as I could, but again, the picture angle is a bit off. So I'm just gonna reference one half of the sword in order to get our shape. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to split the sword in half, UF. I'm gonna select one half of our cube and delete, and then I'm going to add our cube to the symmetry tool. I'm zeroing out my points, so this way I know that my both sides will be even from the center, because our picture is not fully centered. So I just want to make sure that in the program that I'm centered. All right, so I'm just going to extend this up. I'm going to add cuts in here as I start moving along. And I'm going to bring this to somewhat of a point here. So as you can see, this line here is not matching our reference picture. So what I'm going to do is add a cut to our cube and start moving the point, so this way we start matching with our reference photo. I'm going to move this point here down a little bit, and then move this point down some here. All right. And then once we put this in the subdivision tool, we'll get a nice curve as we see here in the reference picture. And this right here comes to a point. And so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add one more cut right about here. And then I'm going to bring this down. And I'm going to extrude. I'm going to extrude. First I want to make sure that this is zeroed out. So now I'm going to do a lot of extruding and then bringing in my points. All right, so far so good. Let's bring this in a bit. Extend it out a little bit more. This is our general shape for the sword. Again, it's very pointy at the edges And because we haven't put it in the subdivision tool yet, once we subdivide it, it'll look a lot better. And it'll have those nice curves that we're looking for. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and put it in our subdivision tool. And let's up the polygon count. Oh, one thing to note, which I didn't take care of before I put it in the subdivision tool. As you can see, we have polygons on the top here, or in the middle of the sword. And if there's polygons in the middle here where you're connecting it with the symmetry tool and you put it in the subdivision surface, you're gonna get like this weird effect where the two parts are meeting, and this is what you don't want. And also, when you do combine this, or you go to export this out as an STL file, you'll have manifolds, which is basically polygons laying on top of a polygon, which the slicer program can't really read once you go to print it, and it'll print it in a weird way. So you want to make sure that you remove those polygons where your two halves are meeting at. So I'm just gonna go ahead and delete this. Because once it prints on a printer, all this space here will be filled with infill. So to get this shape here, I'm going to select these lines. I'm just going to bring that to somewhat of a point here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start bringing these lines in a little bit to create a bevel. And I'll select these lines here along the edge, and then I'll do it for the other side as well. I'm actually going to bring this up, and then I'm going to select the outer line and make that a sharper edge, so this way we have like our cutting edge of the sword, or to give it the look of a cutting edge of the sword. Alright, and then I'll just bring that to somewhat of a point. So that's looking good so far. Alright, so now the sword has this mid part here that extrudes out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a cut down the middle of the sword, and then I'll straighten this line out as well. I'm going to make this as straight as possible, because again, our reference picture is not the best. So let's keep this straight. I was trying to match it with the reference picture, but I think it doesn't make sense to move points individually, because the sword, I'm quite sure the actual sword, this middle piece here, is pretty straight. And then what I'll do is I will select polygons, extrude, and we'll just extrude out ever so slightly. We want to make sure that we do not have these polygons running along the inside of where our two parts meet. So we want to make sure that these are deleted. Alright, so now we have this detail to take care of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a few more cuts into the blade, and then move the points around so that it matches this detail, and then do an extrude, and then we'll have this design pattern that you see here on the blade. So I'm going to fast forward through this process so that you won't have to sit through all of the slicing and then come back when I start moving the points. Fast forward through that, and then you'll be able to see the extrude and then how we get this design. So we pretty much got our general shape. I'm just checking both sides to make sure that we are good. So far, so good. So now we actually got pretty lucky in that we had the cuts in the right place. So this way I didn't have to move a lot of points around in order to get like the curvature shape. And this will take more of a curve shape once we turn the subdivision tool back on. But right now we're in good shape. So what I'm going to do now is going to select these polygons and then do an extrude on them so that we can get that detail that's on the blade. On the reference picture, it looks like this side actually extrudes out and then this side extrudes in, which is really weird, but I believe it extrudes in, so we'll stick with that and we'll extrude in. I think that's far enough. So I know that looks pretty rough. Once we turn this on, you see that we get our pretty basic shape here. And then we're gonna go through the process of cleaning this shape up some. Alright, so all we need to do now is add these circle decorative pieces here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a sphere and scale that down, rotate it 90 degrees, and I'm just going to bring this and scale it to size. So I'm going to do 4 of them and just scale each one to the size that it needs to be. That takes care of the blade. What I'm going to be doing before I export this out as an STL file, I'm going to add a cut into the entire blade, or maybe as far as I can get it, to insert a wooden dowel so that it'll act like a tang for the sword to insert into the handle. So this way when we print it and put everything together, we have some stability to the blade and the sword itself. So for the handle, I'm going to start off with a cube as well. So let's start scaling this down to size. And again, we're running into the same issue with the angle that this photo was taken out of. So I'm using this bottom portion as my reference. All right, let's extrude in. Let's do it this way. Extrude inner. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to extrude in. The handle is starting to take shape. So this is the general shape of the handle. So right now I'm going to just do some cleanup work and get our points a little bit more defined on the handle. And then I'll come back once that is done. All right, so handle has been cleaned up. It's looking pretty good. So essentially this is kind of the sword. We still have some detail work to do on the handle. So there's this interesting piece here that kind of just almost bevels in to the handle. So we're going to recreate that piece, and then we're going to add the holes in the handle. So our handle, that small detail that I referred to earlier is done. It's very subtle. Now I'm going to use the Boolean tool to make our hole. That's the handle. have the blade. Let's go on and fix, because this shouldn't be so, this shouldn't be as pointy. And the reason why that's looking like that is because we have two lines that are very, I'm assuming, very close together. So just had to make some minor adjustments to make sure that our blade is going to fit in there properly. Overall, the sword is looking pretty good, and I'm satisfied with the way this came out. Alright, so there it is. That's Achilles' sword, and that's how I modeled it. I'm going to prep this just a little bit more, tweak the size of it, prep it for printing, print it on the printer, and then I'll come back after it's printed. Alright, so the sword has been printed, and here it is. I ended up splitting the blade in 3 parts, so it can print on my printer a little easier, and then I printed the handle in 1 piece. Added a slot in the middle here for a wooden dowel to be inserted in, and I also added some slots in here for some wooden dowels to be added to hold the blades in place. So I have something special in mind for this sword that I want to do. That's why I didn't do a finish on it. Eventually I will do a finish on this particular sword, but for this series I want to do something a little different. So thank you all for tuning in so much. Until next time, peace and love. God bless.